Ah, oh my gosh. Emily Adrian, the writer of this book, which I've been seeing, sorry that it's reflective, which I've been seeing in airports, on subways, everywhere. This is like, it's so great to have you on here. I'm sorry that I have a library copy. I gave both of my other copies away. But thank you for coming and speaking to me about this.
Thank you for having me. It's a library copy and it's a book of the month copy, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of things. It is a book of
Yeah,
the month. What is that?
where are
Can you
they where
explain?
are they getting that?
Where are they getting that? August
Yeah.
2025 book of the month. Whose book of the month is it? I'm sure it's many.
It's a book of the month is like a subscription service that's been around for a
Oh.
really long time, and they choose like a few books per month, and then if you subscribe, you get those books in the mail. But it's actually like a separate
Oh.
edition from just like the edition that my publisher puts out. It's kind of like getting a film tie-in version or something. It's a separate book.
Oh. Well,
Same
it's
book.
it's like a little limited printing that adds that on it.
Yeah,
That's you know how that is? Okay, I'll tell you the backstory of that, Emily, because I put this on reserve when I picked it up. The librarian was like, I donated my copy to the library. That's how it's the book of
I
the month.
see. I see.
Wild. Emily, Adrian, you are here with me in this Zoom, to talk about this great book, to talk about additionally many of your other fantastic books. You're the author of Daughterhood, the second season, and Everything Here is Under Control, which Daughterhood is nonfiction, right?
It's a memoir, yeah.
It's a memoir, yes. So Daughterhood's your memoir, and then of course, second season and Everything Here is Under Control, your novels, as well as two critically acclaimed novels for young adults. Um, Seduction Theory is out now from Little Brown and in the UK from Wheatonfield and Nicholson. Your work has appeared in Granta, The Point, Joyland, Epoch, Alta Journal, LARB, and The Millions. You're originally from Portland, Oregon, but you currently live in New Haven, Connecticut.
That's right.
You live right there. Emily, please go ahead if you wouldn't mind and read to us from Seduction Theory.
Yeah. I will just start at the beginning.
I love that.
At the creative writing department's end of year party, Ethan's secretary fed him kale with her fingers. Ethan wasn't supposed to call Abigail his secretary. Trouble was, Abigail often referred to herself as his secretary in wry subversion of the school's progressive values, and her jokes had eclipsed her actual job title in Ethan's memory. The party was crowded. Grad students were crammed into the kitchen, hoping their advisors heard them talking about sex. In the adjacent living room, academic spouses grew weary of discussing summer plans as if everyone had summers off. Soon the house would overheat. Guests would spill into the yard, but for now stayed close to the collapsible buffet table on which they'd placed their offerings. I brought the kale salad, said Abigail, who was not attractive, but to whom Ethan was attracted. He'd formed a habit of fixating on her least appealing features, her crusty eyelashes and fleshy earlobes, daring his lust to subside, which it did not. I'm not a fan of that vegetable, he admitted. Oh, I massaged it. Have you ever had it massaged? She looked deep into his eyes with an intensity that might have indicated sexual devotion, but was not uncommon in the type of person by whom Ethan found himself daily surrounded. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know how it's usually prepared. She stuck an arm between two adjuncts and grabbed a fistful of her own salad. She was drunk. He was excited. Abigail shoved the greens through Ethan's closed lips. Oh, they were terrible. Coarse and curled and bitter, gritty with some kind of debris. Are there nuts in this? He asked. Quinoa. Ah, he said, chewing indefinitely. That is different. Pleased, she drank her drink. Ethan stood ass to ass with party host and department chair Joyce Lockhart, who was engaged in a separate conversation. We adopted him when he was 7, Joyce was saying. He was called Humphrey on his papers, which, no. Then we discovered he hates females his own age but loves puppies, so we named him Humbert. Temperate laughter, someone's sandalwood perfume. Lola by the Kinks. Do you want to smoke a cigarette? Ethan asked Abigail. These were the first words he had spoken to his beautiful wife, Simone, when they were just shy of 21. Abigail would not want to smoke a cigarette because Abigail was 39, a single mother, and wearing a scarf in June. Abigail said, "Oh, and yes?" That Abigail said yes might be the whole story.
Whew. Thank you so much for that. I just want to say like what bathos, but I realize how incorrect that would be because bathos implies the existence of the sublime before, and there's absolutely nothing sublime about this milieu.
No.
We're no, we're a small academic department, English department, and MFA program, and I think what makes seduction theory just so like formally inventive, at least for me, is that it's a thesis, right? It's a graduate student's thesis that she's writing about some misconduct between the reigning couple of the English department. Um, Ethan, whom we just saw there, and then Simone, who's the like Maggie Nelson, edgy theorist, memoirist crossover everyone wants to be or maybe be with. Um, and the narrator is kind of like taking us on this cheeky and enraged journey through her relationship with both of them. So yeah, that was thank you for that. It's like I had to mute myself because you laugh all the way through this book, and I don't know what you're reading. But yeah, Emily, I think the first question I want to ask you, right, is like it's about like how your book is is manages to breathe life into a really well-worn genre. And we're seeing a few other books that are doing this, like The Laughter, the one I showed you, and taking that kind of like the campus novel, which we're familiar with from writers like Kingsley Amis, Richard Russo, David Lodge, and just turning that on its head. When I first opened this book, right, and I was like, oh my God, okay, so it's not some like lascivious, like the world passed me by, so I'll have sex, like Philip Roth type
Yeah.
groomer professor, right? It's actually the point of view is the student. I was thinking, oh my God, it's going to be like a Blue Angel, like a Francine Prose kind of twist here. But then when I finally put your book down, I was like, man, you even subverted that. Like you took us like several steps, I think, farther, and you made some very intentional choices that really kind of like springboarded off, I think, or encouraged us to springboard off some ideas that we're familiar with, and then just like go off into outer space. I think it's a romp for that reason. And that's what makes it so funny. And so I'm really interested in hearing about like how you like how like kind of how you found your way into such an unusual campus novel. Like what kind of sparked this and what was going through your head as you were making those choices?
Um, I think so. I mean, as you've already pointed out, like the biggest choice that I think sort of subverts expectations is the book begins as if it were just going to be this really straight ahead kind of wry, sardonic, free indirect third person account of a man who is about to cheat on his wife in the most cliched, like hapless way possible. Um, and what you learn if you keep reading a few pages past what I read is that it's actually a combination of like some observation and a lot of speculation on by a first person narrator who kind of like emerges a few pages later in from a first person point of view. Um, and and she is, primarily Ethan's wife's graduate student or mentee. Um, and so you realize right away that the narrator is not impartial, is not objective. Um, and you're reading, a draft of her MFA thesis that she's using to kind of like seek literary revenge on these people. So that first, just the framework itself, I think, allows the book to diverge from a lot of of cliches that you might expect in a campus novel. I also think for a campus novel, like it's not super preoccupied with the campus as such. Like there's not a lot of description. Um, there's not really a lot of like nostalgia or sentimentality applied to the campus. Like it's very different from Donna Tartt's Secret History. I, I, I as the writer and Robbie as the writer don't really spend any time trying to like sell you on the allure of academia. Um, and insofar as the novel does, poke satirical fun at academics and how they behave and how a department might be run, it's in pretty like broad, humorous strokes. To the point where I don't even think this English department is depicted in a way that we could say is like realistic. Like I think there appear to be like four professors in this entire department at like a really like elite school. Um, so it's a campus novel, but I think it's completely without reverence for the genre of campus novels, which allows it to be pretty unexpected.
I find that so true. I was actually like I just did an interview with Emma Rio, whose first book really kind of exploded and got off the backlist way onto the front list because it was COVID, right? And she had written this
Hmm.
kind of dark academia, whatever, the really, really cool kind of this sort of mysterious story. And then I think a lot of students were feeling like Gen Z, it's 2020, I can't go back to campus. We're feeling a kind of like, like a nostalgia or a little aspirational about like the freedom of the college campus. And something that I don't know, like I don't feel remotely like and haven't felt since 2006. And I think you're like the way that you depict the campus as this very it's a transactional space, right? It's an ego driven space. There's like a leak in the ceiling, and there's kind of like a leak in everyone's mind, just like
Yeah.
the vital forces leaking out of your brain. It's like, I mean, that's the real experience, right? I think for many, I'm not saying everyone, but of kind of like where higher ed is at, and where we may have arrived from this like I don't know beacon on the hill that we thought it used to be. And so I love that. I really love that it's just kind of like, yeah, it's a campus. The most I think like I don't know, the most romantic depiction of a place like on or near the campus is the lake they run around,
Yeah.
Simone and Robbie. That's like I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I want to go there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think too, and perhaps this is because you have very little affinity for the campus as a place. This book, it's a slimmer volume, but it doesn't take place entirely on the campus or even in the town. It's also a road.
Right.
Yeah, and you kind of like you move really seamlessly among a lot of different tonal registers, many of which books take like God, like double the page limit just to like manage one of these. Sex comedy, road novel, quasi-divorce novel, campus satire, of course. Like how did you kind of it's like how did you manage that like I don't know, like those tonal shifts in such a spare amount of pages. Because I'll tell you, Emily, I read this and I wasn't like, whoa, where are we? What? I was like, oh yes,
Right.
of course we're in Iowa City. You know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
seamless, and so it was really cool.
I think because there's this the the sort of like rule governing all of this, right, is that it's Robbie's thesis. And she, as the narrator, is open about it being, a work in progress. So she's sometimes like rewrites something to get it the way she wants it, and shows you like what words she changed to get the effect that she's actually aiming for on the page. Um, and I think, and my commitment to that idea that, it was a thesis and perhaps not even the final draft of her thesis, allowed me to kind of like get away with a lot of things that might otherwise have felt sloppy because I'm not the one whose idea is half baked. It's her.
Is
Um,
yeah.
so there are like these, there's these kind of abrupt changes in tone. There are times when the plot seems to sort of veer off course. We're suddenly on this like wacky road trip. Um, but all of that is sort of because I'm trying to depict Robbie's process, and I really wanted it to be a book about writing as much as it is about, the events of the story that the narrator is telling you. Like it is a book about somebody learning how to write a book. And one of the main tensions in the book is like between what Robbie seems to want or what she thinks she wants from these people, from her professors, um, and what she might want, from her writing practice or from her professional life down the road. And she has to figure out like what it means to become a writer and sort of prioritize that over these like romantic, emotional, sexual whims she has. Um, so, it's not my first novel, but it is her first novel. And she kind of does that thing where you try to do everything at once in your debut.
Gosh, I mean, it's such it like in that sense, it feels like actually quite an optimistic book because, so often you'll crack open a campus novel only to get immediately mired in this kind of, you know, Sophoclean story of like egos and bitterness and pettiness and like sexual liaisons. And so rarely is the actual like creative or scholarly practice of any given character invoked except for like maybe comic relief or like I don't know like
Right.
structure or something like even but this of course we see the MFA thesis which yeah man a more capacious and unsentimental form there never was. That's a really great choice. But we see the MFA thesis, brought in as a means of kind of structuring the book. But we also see like actual like that's what the parts I really loved as well, where like Robbie really thinking through what do I want from this?
Yeah.
Why do I do this? What do I want? Like all the questions that one as a teacher is truly trying to get her students to ask themselves. And often when someone is as lost in their own just like weird mental machinations as Ethan and Simone get, one doesn't prompt their students to ask themselves, but Robbie is asking herself. And I was like,
Right.
thank you. Like I was really excited for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan, that's a really great point. I think like, I don't know, maybe to that effect, and perhaps we could get into a little bit more like of like the layers of method you did here because yes, this is not at all your first book, and neither is it your first book about like limerence, cathexis, you know what I mean, like navigating these specific like close quarters entanglements. But it's also it's not it's you imitating a writer who's like a kind of an early career like fledgling writer, and then it's also kind of it's like you or her imitating or trying to imitate her idea of a novelist, right? Well, she's also writing what is very obviously autofiction.
Right.
Like that's so many layers of the onion. And I think
Yeah.
and you keep it so lively throughout. And I'm wondering about I know the question is I didn't like it's not a formal one, but like I guess it's a follow-up. Why and how the layers of method? How did you where did you have to dig to pull that off?
I mean, it was written in layers. And I think,
Yeah.
many times I kind of had to go back to the beginning and take a look at like every paragraph and negotiate, how much of that paragraph is really close to Robbie's perspective as a writer and a student working her way through her thesis, and then how much of that paragraph is really yielding to the story that she's telling and treating Ethan and Simone as characters in their own right. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the process was just like fiddling with that border between my book and the book within the book, and yeah, it was very oniony.
It's I really truly I can't say enough. I love the effect of it though. Like and I imagine too, right, were you kind of digging back into your own fledgling days years ago? Like, like insecurities or thoughts, or were you just kind of totally conjuring Robbie.
Um, sometimes, I mean, like my thoughts as a young writer and how to write.
Yeah, purely thoughts as a young writer and like what you wanted out of writing and what you were. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, there's a I think especially when you're young and you're trying to write like your first book or your first stories, like you find yourself kind of fretting over how much of your real life to put into the book,
Hmm.
and what the cost of that might be. And I think young writers or novice writers tend to kind of overestimate the cost. They think like, oh, if I put in this memory, like the person who inspired it is gonna see it and know and get upset, or like my uncle's gonna sue me. There's like always some like
Yes.
litigious like figure looming in the background. And for the most part, like people don't see themselves in your book, or if they do, they're wrong about what they're seeing. Um,
Definitely.
a lot of times people, if they do see a memory that they can, trace to their shared life with you or whatever, like they're flattered and they're curious about it. But there are times I think when every writer borrows stuff from life and they're not totally comfortable with the outcome of it, or with the perception of it, and they do it because it makes the book better. And so she's learning how to strike that balance and how to kind of weigh the costs of using her real life for material. And yeah, I remember fretting over that a lot as a young writer, not as much anymore.
I same. I definitely related to that part of her, like set of concerns at least, and then I think I also there's parts where she's sort of negotiating her relationship to her own ambition, where she's
Yeah.
like, wait, like this might be the thing that I want, and then kind of asking herself like, well, why do I want this or this or that? And then I was like, I mean, those are some of my favorite parts of the book. So I was like, this is like my 20s, and like and it feels like such a I can really imagine, like the perilous place she's in and plenty have been in, where it's like I have this ambition, I have this fear. Here's this text that kind of like melds the two in like a very sort of
Yeah.
molten way. Yeah. Um, all that said, though, this novel doesn't end horribly. It is not the mousetrap. Not everyone dies at the end. I won't. I definitely won't give away what happens, but it's the ending is very twisty and surprising, and I think to my mind it's way better than the kind of like tragic explosion that could have been. Um, so keeping the question vague as well, in the midst of this like extramarital chaos and all the ego going on in this book, what like what were the like redeeming elements of these characters for you? Like what did you see in them that kind of like kept you I don't know. It feels like you kind of like held out hope for them in some ways, and I love that.
I okay, so I would say like the main thing that has surprised me about the reception of the book, is how quick readers are to be like, oh, these people are horrible. Like I hate these people. These are the most unlikable characters I've ever read. Um, and I might be like outing myself, but I don't think they're that bad. I, it's like um Ravi's depiction of them is really ruthless, and she, I think, gets into like some really flattering corners of their psychology. But I think ultimately, like what they all want is pretty understandable. Like we have this couple who, in middle age, like really care about each other and they really love each other. But it's also been a really long time since they were any kind of intimate with somebody else. And that feels
Mhm.
weird because, if they've been together since they were kids, and now they're different because they're middle-aged people and no one has like seen them. And also nobody's had, permission to really like get to know them the way you do when you're falling in love. So they want to be validated, not only by each other, but by other people. And they have sort of like superficial ways to make that happen. They kind of wield power in the classroom to try to get like a taste of that. But they're, they they want things that they don't have. And then, Robbie too is like she's a young person. She's on the other side of that journey. And she wants to love someone and be loved, and she has no idea how to make that happen. And she also wants to like she wants a book deal. Like who among us
Oh, yeah.
has hasn't wanted these things? Um,
Right.
and I think their redemption is that they all three of them they really learn to like adjust their expectations. I think, Ethan and Simone have to move forward with a version of their marriage that um doesn't completely rely on the like perception of them as perfect. They have to kind of like break up with their public image that they've been in like a throuple with this whole time. And Robbie too has to realize that like she's not going to get what she wants out of her married professors. And she has to, take a hard look at what writing is for and what her education is really for. And so
Mm.
I think that's why, at the end they have I would classify the book as a comedy and that like at the end everybody sort of is fine, one way or another. And some of them maybe are happier than others, but I think we can all imagine like a happy future for these people. Um, and I just feel like they deserve it.
I honestly like I really so to be frank, like that rings true for me when I step like here's the thing, right? You can open this book and you can read it, and it is like a like rip roaring delightful comedy, but you can become the like 22-year-old MFA student again, and you can project this and project that. But like take it, it's weird to say this, but taking out the like old the almost like imperial subjectivity of the reader, this book is just about people who want things, and they are
Yeah,
quite likable. Like they are quite likable, including the like Simone as the just like, oh my God, like it's me, like I'm the Joan Jett of academia, like yeah,
yeah,
badass Gen X punk rock, blah, blah. But then it's just like, and I'm also like a huge dork and deeply
yeah,
insecure, and I mean, it's so immediately like it's so easy to respond to her and love her. It's so easy to respond to Ethan. I think the way you let Ethan be more than the sex pest, than the archetypal sex pest. Right, like and that's just like I think because he is, and I think like one could read this book and be like, oh, he's just jealous of his brilliant wife, so he's gonna do the man
yeah,
thing. It's so much more complicated than that. I mean, like it is that, and it's way more than that, and more than that, excuse me. And so I think that like I don't know. I think that what you have here, right, in this shiny reflective book, here it is. What you have here is a story that I think on the first read is in many ways like available to be overdetermined by a reader's really intense experience with all these like really potent and fascinating themes. And then on a second read, you're like, man, these people are actually quite great. And
yeah,
like life is just so friggin' intense. And then Emily, that's another layer of the onion, right? Is it's just like, oh, I get it. When I was here, it's the Liz Lemon thing. When I was here thinking that I was being picked on and punched down to, I was also the asshole. Like this was
right,
more complicated than I allowed myself to. Yeah. So
yeah.
I, yeah, I think that I love the layers of this onion. Okay. Oh, speaking of layers, this book. Um, Layered segue. Speaking of layers, this book is known for being playfully self-referential. Hannah Pittard, another oniony writer, funny
Yeah,
oniony writer,
seriously.
right?
I
Like,
was
yeah,
for that reason I was so scared when I opened up the New York Times review and saw her byline. I was just like, "Oh my God." Like if I had known in advance that she was writing it, I would have been terrified for months.
yeah, I think that I don't blame you, but I think instead of being hoisted by Hannah Pittard, you were lifted up.
I
by
know.
Cata Petard in a rave, of, I think a very well-deserved rave, that praised the way Robbie, like, kind of like, basically the way this that Robbie has written a thesis and you have written a book that is full of Easter eggs, right? And that is full of kind of like insider baseball writery stuff, right? But also stuff that I think any reader who's paying close attention will just, oh my God, will just be enthused to enjoy. This book asks for an immediate reread, which to me is like, that's like the apotheosis of upmarket lit fic. You want to get there? I mean,
Yeah.
great, you got there. Like, it's awesome. So, one example she gave, and I'm happy to give right now, is the from the excerpt you read, right, where the Robbie describes the party she's at in the way Simone told her to describe parties in her writing
Right.
workshop. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cool. It's this kind of like insular writing world stuff like exploded open. You described your writing process of like the planting of these Easter eggs, right, as a kind of a graph by graph sort of like layered and
Yeah.
examining, yeah, procedure. I'm really interested in like, how, I don't know, this book seems to have attracted a readership the far outstrips, right, just the kind of close knit MFA world. How did you manage to like bring so many people in on jokes that are really like, I mean, man, they're super niche, but they're so funny, and I think anyone would love them.
I mean, I um so like the example from Hannah's review and that cropped up in the excerpt that I read, um, where you learn later in the book that something Robbie has been doing all along was something Simone actually told her to do. Um, that, like putting that stuff in was just yet another layer. Like to go back and, to make sure that every paragraph was sort of like the right expression of either the novel or the novel within the novel, was one like major task in assembling the layers. But there was this extra sort of like more subtle layer, I think, that I really, it was one of the last things I did really was I went through and showed Simone's influence on Robbie's thesis. And so it's kind of weird, but a lot of Robbie's quirks as a writer were in there before I realized, like, oh, she must have learned that from Simone. So I had Robbie doing that thing with the parties before I had Simone telling her, here's how you write a party scene. Um, and and then, the reader has the satisfaction of realizing that a lot of Robbie's idiosyncrasies are actually taken from Simone. And I think that interests me and also charms me because I actually don't like I didn't go to grad school. And I don't have that kind of relationship with like a professor or a mentor where someone literally like taught me how to write. But I know a lot of people who do. I know a lot of people who can sort of point to the things that seem really unique to their voice and tell you where they got it or who told them to do that. And it's not just writers. I mean, my husband is a political theorist and he has a PhD. And I know that he has things that enter into his writing and into his pedagogy that he can trace back to his advisors. Um, and I think that's really cool. Like I think it's cool that you can kind of trace generations of thinking by looking at who taught who. Um, and I'm maybe like kind of envious of it. So I wanted that to be in the book. It's also just it's really funny if you are kind of an outsider to academia, but you're around people who went to Iowa or went to one of these storied programs and they tell you something that they learned there as if it's like common sense. And it sounds so ridiculous when somebody's just like, oh, like you can't use adverbs. Like everybody knows you don't use adverbs. And you're just like, sure, sure, man. Like um, and so there's,
You're just
there's
like
both
in your
like,
flannel and like across the river, you're like, whatever, dude, I guess. Like,
so I think, there's the, those moments of sort of self-reference in the text do come from a place where I'm just like, oh, that's so cool. And then at the same time, I'm like, and that's so ridiculous. And I think that's kind of why it works. It's just that combination of regard for the inner workings of academia.
That's so, man, that's I think such a fabulous observation, and also like what a simultaneous, I don't know, redeeming factor and crisis that type of mentorship, which I too love, and I like had have experienced to various degrees, and I love, like you, I love to see that in my friends writing as well. But like that should be housed really, really, really located within academia, which represents and has in the past a whole lot of like excitement and freedom and like big ideas and cool stuff, and also a whole lot of coercion and control and dashing of dreams. Like it's just
Right.
a kind of a, yeah, a really intense flashpoint. And so this image I think of you, like, I'm sorry, I don't know why you're like skateboarding, and I think it's because I like drove into Portland a while back, and I was like, oh, sick, those guys are skating on that half pipe in flannel. It's like the '90s. But it's like,
Yeah.
you're like, like you're just like, whatever. Like, I love to observe this from the outside, though I recognize, right, that this has its downsides. I think it's a refreshing approach to a genre, a subgenre that is written and perpetuated and replicated by those who are within the
Yeah.
the social confines of its
Yeah.
setting. So. Yeah. Which is curious, Emily, though, like, how did you, I know I'm going to get into a question that's like kind of about MFAs and writers and stuff, but like, how did you find, I'm sorry if you're getting asked this a ton, but how did you find your way, like, your interest, into like this particular story, if you were just, like, not of that world, but, nevertheless fascinated by it? How did you kind of like find your footing or your curiosity around it?
For me, the setting was really about needing a environment in which regular people kind of have celebrity status. Like I was really interested in
Mm,
how, Robbie could be this close to people that she really, really idolizes, and how these people
mhm.
who are kind of like ordinary upper middle class people in a regular old long-term marriage find themselves to be uh like public figures almost. Can you be quiet? Sammy, stop, stop. Um, and I live in New Haven, which is like a place where that's happening all the time. You lock eyes with somebody as you pass them in a crosswalk, and they look at you like, yeah, you know who I am, and like I do know who they are.
Yeah.
And so that was just like that's interesting to me. And I wanted to write about it. And like the MFA program is a really convenient setting for that, because not only do you have access to your professors, but you are the material that you produce and turn in an MFA program can be really intimate and unsettling. So it was just like a really good opportunity to write about the dynamics that I wanted to write about.
The whole like we're workshopping this piece, and wow, I can recognize who that everyone in this room is in fact a character in it phenomenon
Right.
is it, exploited to the great benefit. I think of your story here. It's just like really, you're so right. Like it's these are just such unique environments where, you Chicago the same way, right? Where it's like, oh, here is Martha Nussbaum. She's
Right.
not Beyonce, but she is Beyonce. Like she like to everyone here and right now, we're like, oh my God, there she is walking down the street. It's a
Yeah.
wild
And I
phenomenon.
think there's like a level of allure because she's not Beyonce, right? Like
Yeah, right. Yeah.
she's Martha, and you might take a class with her. You might email her. You
Yes.
could potentially reach her. And then she also, like when the celebrities to whom we do have access kind of like flatter our ideas of ourselves as like deep academic writerly types, like that's its own appealing thing.
Oh man. Yeah, that is really going to actually, I think, segue beautifully into the next question here, because like when we think about the American MFA right now, it's very like it's these places are still kind of helmed by like the late 50s, early 60s, came up in the 80s, like dirty realism writers. So people who like really maybe valued more of a like Carver and Cheever school of
Yeah.
kind of like domestic realism and that sort of spare fiction. But then more and more so, right, these programs you're starting to see millennials who are I think writing towards a different type of goal. I call it identity fiction, right? But I think there's like broadly there's an interest in critiquing power, right? Because I guess we could of course check with your partner, but I think we're in postmodernism still, and we're still there, and so I think I too am very invested in critiquing power. I think it's an absolutely noble ambition. But I think we can also get into this kind of really intense and sort of combustible place, right, where um there's an old guard, there's sort of a reigning style, and there's kind of a new guard coming in. And then, of course, there is this, the students represent an even newer guard. And when you introduce this idea of, which is, God, it's so true. It's just it's a very, very accurate observation of the like the middle class celebrity, the like Volvo driving
Right.
superstar who, who then it is the academic professor. Um, and the weird cathexis and the levels of like ego and projection that are going on for everyone involved in that situation. It's just kind of like a heady and at times I would say even it can verge on toxic brew, right? Where you're just like, whoa, like I just want to figure out what's going on with my art as Robbie does. But then there are all these other kind of interests doing battle around me. And so one imagines, I know I've painted this this like renegade countercultural picture of your like Portland life. I don't know why. Observing, to my mind, a dynamic that's like really like stifles creativity.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm curious, like you've also named and you've named here and in this book some things that are really great about the academic environment and mentorship and like what is possible there. And so I'm curious, like how would you right now, if I was like, Emily, what do you want to do? Like what do you want to what should like what would the ideal kind of like creative writing mentorship look like? What could these programs look like? Like how would you like remake this? Because I think we're a little bit we're in kind of a stifled place right now, as your book points out as well.
Right. So I think so I despite not having an MFA, I do teach in an MFA program. I teach at a low
Yeah.
residency program in Sewanee, Tennessee. And it's not at all like the program in seduction theory. A lot of our students are older. A lot of them have had, full careers and raised kids and had like entire lives before they have the opportunity to like really study writing. Um, and so I don't know how representative like my experiences in the classroom with students are, but I tend to have a couple of conversations with students over and over again. And one of them is I think we have come to expect from MFA programs, but also maybe from education at large, that there will be like really concrete results professionally from getting a graduate degree, um, which is really like a kind of a weird thing to expect from like a humanities degree and maybe a creative writing degree in particular. And it's a little bit hypocritical often for like somebody in my position or your position to say that because like we did, we got a lot of the things that we might have wanted professionally as young writers.
Mm.
Um, and some of that does come from, connections you make along the way, whether that's in your education or getting to know people in the industry or whatever. But I think sometimes in MFA programs, like students are expecting to skip a lot of steps. Like they want that like meet and greet with the visiting literary agent before they have read like nearly as many novels as they should read. And a lot of what people are reading when they're studying creative writing is still sort of in pursuit of like a market that they think might be right for their book, or getting, or like knowing what's selling or what agents want to see. Like there's so many conversations surrounding the industry, really, like that we're having like in the classroom kind of. And I think
Mhm.
that like there's certainly a place for that, and I always want to like help my students do what they can with the work that they're really proud of. But I think that before you can expect like sort of like professional rewards, like you have to get to a place where writing is really like what you want to do with your time. It has to satisfy you like creatively and like spiritually before you're going to produce anything that's like worth anything to anybody. And also it's like that should be hopefully like a really like wonderful and like satisfying time in your life as a writer before you have to worry about if you're ever going to make money off of your writing, or if it's going to be as much money as you made, with your last book. Like these are things that are like kind of stifling to the creative process once you have the privilege of worrying about them. Um, but like I honestly would just like love to see my students like more in love with reading. Like I would love
Mhm.
them to just like read widely, read stuff that they never thought they would read, that they'd never heard of. And to become like students of close reading, to, be able to like look at a piece of published writing and figure out like what makes it beautiful and meaningful and in fact publishable, and be able to kind of like take um some of those ideas or techniques and use them to improve their own writing. And that my best students absolutely do that. And it's funny because what I've noticed about like the best students I've ever taught is that they are first and foremost like really excellent readers, and they have the capacity to get better as writers, but it's not necessarily that they were like born with a gift of writing fiction. It's that they are really good readers.
I think challenging that kind of like, again, very romantic, I'd say, notion of the like, oh, genius writer who has the divine gift,
Yeah.
um, and maybe supplanting that with like, listen, like you can totally have talent and aptitude, you can have a desire to want to explore this more, but reading and revision, those are really the two R's that
Yeah.
keep coming for me and for so many other writers as well. I think that, yeah, that's like a lasting career is built on affinities for both. And two, Emily, right? You make such an amazing point. It's like, what are we even talking about when we talk about a career? Are you writing because you must, because this is the thing that lights you up and means the most beyond anything else to you?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's tricky though too, right? And to your point, like it really starts to get, you can really get in your head when it starts to be about like, oh my God, the sales track, oh my God, the advance, and like
Yeah.
one feels, I think, kind of, I don't know, like something is lost, right? When there is an early mentorship environment or an academic environment where maybe those pressures are happening already, or some of the pressures I think that are just like purely personality driven or like theory or style driven that are like don't need to be happening, are
Yeah.
kind of being put there, and I think you eliminate that like really effectively. It's sorry, I had to like formally arrange myself, but it's like it, it's just like really like I don't know. It's maybe my follow up on this, and then I'll go on to less sad things. Sorry, but like the low res feels so different in that you really are like it's all the same, and like it's the exact same process of like helping new and fledgling writers like figure out what's going on with their voices, like build careers, but it feels so different in that you really are encountering more writers who are like formed adults, like they are
Yeah.
adults who have been in the world, and like that is I mean that's just got to be like how is that teaching compare, like how's that experience compared for you with like maybe younger writers? Like that's just got to be a different. all of that?
Well, it's interesting because I think, and so this is something I tell to my older students who are maybe worried about being students in their 60s, like they feel self-conscious or they feel like they're not going to know how to be a student or that role isn't going to feel natural to them. And I think what what I love about older students and what I tell them is like, you are smarter when you are older. Like you just are, like you live your life and you get smarter. And there are
Yeah.
really fundamental, like unimpeachable ways in which my 60-year-old students are smarter than my 20-year-old students.
Yeah.
Um, and they should feel good about that and they should use it. Which
Ugh.
doesn't mean like
Eh.
being, doesn't mean dominating the classroom discussion or, thinking they're hot shit, but just feeling confident in having, a perspective and some experience that really does like add to the classroom environment. Um, and the other thing I think about older students, especially when they've had, full careers or they've had um, just like really, most people by the time they're in late middle age have faced a lot of challenges. And they
Yeah.
really know, like, they really know when they are an expert in something and when somebody else is an expert in something. And
Ooh.
they come to class just like really often really wanting to know like what I have to teach them. And they know that there are things that they could teach me, but that's not what we're doing in that moment. Whereas with like younger students, I think sometimes they are, they're still pretty fresh out of undergrad. Sometimes they're not really that far from being in high school. And like they approach it really differently. Like they're kind of like, oh, like I'm going to show up here and I'm going to prove that I'm the best student here. I'm going to prove that like I already know everything that you might teach me. Um, and that's sometimes those students are really smart and they've been sort of rewarded for thinking. But it's not like the best approach, I don't think, to education.
Ugh. I feel like ideally, as one ages, one sheds their fear more to some,
Yeah.
like just becomes less fearful. And I think it's totally reflected in like the 60-year-old's lack of a desire to prove themselves as opposed to the
Yeah.
25. I,
Yeah.
very, so very true and well observed. Okay. So seduction theory. Speaking of experience and wisdom, Seduction Theory is your sixth book. Um, and your titles include both like upmarket adult literary fiction, the two titles I mentioned, and YA literary fiction.
Yeah.
Um, which is so, I don't know, as someone who grew up loving Jerry Spinelli and Lois Lowry, I very much appreciate the work you do. Um, I'm really curious if you could share more about like your career arc and why you've like gravitated towards the genres and themes you've gravitated towards.
Yeah. I mean, I started writing and publishing when I was really young. Um, and to be like really honest, like my first couple of novels were YA because I was a YA. Um, I was, in my early 20s, and I think
Yeah.
adolescence was kind of the part of life, the only part of life over which I felt I had any authority or, on which I had any real perspective worth sharing. Um, I think my first couple books were probably always going to be coming of age stories to some extent, but it happened that at the time, which was like the early 2010s, YA was having like a really hot moment. It was like the John Green era of YA.
Oh
So
wow, yeah.
if you had written anything that approached YA, your agent and your editor really wanted it to be YA. Um,
Yeah.
and so I took advantage of that moment and I wrote, toward that genre. Um, And it's funny because I recently I never look once I publish my books and I've moved past like the publicity cycle, I never look at them again. But I was recently Little Brown wanted me to promote something related to seduction theory, and I had to go on like Apple Books and look up my own name. And I was offered a sample of my first YA novel. And I was like, oh, and at first I was like, I'm not going to click that. And then I did. I clicked it. And the first page of it was just like, it sounded so much like me, like in the most like recognizable, unthreatening way that I was like, oh, I've just always been this person. Like we're calling it, the genre keeps changing kind of depending on like the best way to sell books in that moment, but like it's still just
Oh,
me. But it was hard.
uh,
Like I got when I got older, I did, I wanted to write things that were like more complex and sophisticated, and um it was really hard. It was hard to like to pivot within my career and say like, okay, now I write literary fiction for adults. And if I always felt like for a really long time, if there was anything in my work that pointed toward genre fiction or like women's fiction, as they like to call it, then publishers were like, yes, like that is what you have done. Thank you so much for this women's fiction. Um, I was like, okay, fine. But
okay.
I always really like, I wanted to write the best book that I could write. And I think I always wanted to be taken a little bit more seriously than I was until Seduction Theory, when I finally felt like I had written like the best book I could write. I was a much like better writer, reader, thinker than I had been when I was 22. And I felt like I could kind of demand to be taken seriously. And it worked. I think that this has like had a reception that has really surpassed that of my previous books. And it's getting read by like more types of people. It's like, I think what honestly kind of what's happened is like as a writer I've kind of grown up, but like on the published page, which is like awkward and embarrassing, but I am like also very grateful for it at the same time.
It's all any of us can say, right? Who
Yeah,
aren't like, didn't publish their first book at 40. Like I
yeah.
mean, I think it makes me think too, right, of oh man, why on earth would I blank on her name? She wrote the Middlesteins.
Jamie Attenborough.
Jamie Attenberg. Yeah,
Yeah.
we both got her. And how, she too was, I think, like she was also in the process of growing up on the page when she was like writing again, like what I could classify as a reader as like psychological realism. It's like upmarket, it's complex. And her publisher was saying, thank you for this woman's fiction. And
Right.
like just like and it's like here's the cover of someone like in a sun hat looking into a field. And it's oh man, it's such a I feel like it's such there's so many like weird ego insults, but like I feel like it's just such a wallop to write the quality of writing that you're writing, that she's writing, that honestly like so many people are writing and have it be like marketed in a very like way over determined ultra specific way, or like even if we get lucky and it gets marketed a little more broadly, no one buys it. That's what happened to
Yeah.
me. Mine was marketed a little more broadly, no one bought it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was just one of those, I was like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
crazy making. It's crazy
Yeah. I
making.
think that is often like the calculation is they're like, well, do we want no one to buy it, or do we want a lot of people to buy it and then get really mad that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be?
That's exactly it, Emily. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. Should we tank this person this way or this way?
Yeah.
Which and then that's me being dramatic because no one's tanked, but it's
Yeah.
this I think when you're young, right, it can feel like, whoa, this is, to borrow Robbie's experience, it feels bigger than it ever actually is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, well, you've kind of answered I think the second part of this question, but it's okay. I'm gonna ask anyway because the final question is always a choice. I let the writer tell me, if you'd like to share a bit about like it could be like something you're working on if that excites you, or just like anything that you feel excited about like right now, creatively, what you're reading, what you're writing, what you're watching, anything. Or if you have like a piece of advice, people have been giving it to like kind of like fledgling, novice writers, but also like people have started giving advice to mid-career writers too on this little podcasty thing. So Either of those, please. I would love to hear it. I'm sure the people who watch it would love to hear it.
So I'll answer the first part
Yeah.
about what I'm working on now. Um, I just started a new novel, which is a big relief because I have a new like a relatively new baby at home.
Mhm.
So it's always hard to like she's my second kid, but it's always hard to like figure out how your writing fits in to your life once you add, you know, yet another layer. So there's always there's already like teaching and family life and you know there's everything and now there's also it's like new person who I made. Um, but I'm figuring it out and I it's funny because I before I had her before I had my daughter I was pregnant and I was like telling myself like you are not allowed to have this baby and then write like a postpartum novel like you just can't do it like nobody's first of all you'll be right back in like women's fiction land and also like that the moment of like edgy motherhood novels has come and gone like we've moved on to like the the non-monogamy divorce novels like we can't go back
True.
um and and then you know but it's such a like having kids is so intellectually intense that like I can't help writing about it and so I'm writing a novel about a stay-at-home dad who is a former gambling addict
Ooh.
and who finds himself now in middle age like kind of addicted to having babies and his wife is like the breadwinner she's a physician and he keeps you know convincing her to like put her career on hold one more time to have one more baby um to get his fix. And I think what I'm interested in is like writing away from the idea of parenthood as like the ultimate phase of responsibility and stability and like evidence that you've like figured all your shit out and writing toward it as something that's actually like really it feels really reckless. It can feel really high stakes and like out of control. And it can also just feel like so addicting. Like when you're holding like a newborn, you're just like, I should have 10 more of these. So I wanted to, you
Oh,
know, I wanted to take that like guy who's only ever like half grown up and sort of put him in that moment in the middle of the night where he's just thinking like, all I need is babies.
incredible. Wow, it's like the gambling, I don't know, like the addiction novel meets the quiverful novel without the
Yeah.
religion. Incredible. Man, I
Um,
cannot wait to read that.
thanks.
Emily, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for writing this.
Thank
Everyone, please
you.
purchase this. Ooh, it was so great. Fun fact, I pre-ordered this and then we moved. So it went to the
Mm.
address. Then I found it again in our next place in a bookstore that only stocks like the buzzy stuff. And I was like, this book finds me. So,
Yeah.
um, reader, viewer, whoever you may be, I hope that book finds you. Emily, thank you again.
Thank you.